Welcome back to Dimebag Darren World Headquarters here in the corner of my living room. Once again, got my favorite book. We are on Book 2, Chapter 3. Hope you're ready. Book 2, Chapter 3. When Hardin denied owning the journal, he was perhaps technically correct, but no more. Hardin had been the leading spirit in the drive to incorporate Terminus into an autonomous municipality. He had been elected its first mayor, and so it was not surprising that although not a single share of the journal stock was in his name, some 60% was controlled by him in a more devious fashion. There are ways. Consequently, when Hardin began suggesting to Perrin that he be allowed to attend meetings of the Board of Trustees, it was not quite coincidence that the journal began a similar campaign, and the first mass meeting in the history of the Foundation was held, demanding representation of the city in the national government. And eventually Perrin capitulated with ill grace. Hardin, as he sat at the foot of the table, speculated idly as to just what it was that made physical scientists such poor administrators. It might be merely that they were too used to inflexible fact and far too unused to pliable people. In any case, there was Thomas Sutt and George Farah on his left, London Crast and Yate Fulham on his right, with Perrin himself presiding. He knew them all, of course, but they seemed to have put on an extra special bit of pomposity for the occasion. Hardin half dozed through the initial formalities, then perked up when Perrin sipped on the glass of water before him by way of preparation, and said, "I find it very gratifying to be able to inform the board that since our last meeting, I've received word that Lord Dorwin, Chancellor of the Empire, will arrive in Terminus in 2 weeks. It may be taken for granted that our relations with Anacreon will be smoothed out to our complete satisfaction as soon as the Emperor is informed of the situation." He smiled and addressed Hardin across the length of the table. "Information to this effect has been given to the journal." Hardin snickered below his breath. It seemed evident that Perrin's desire to strut this information before him had been one of the reasons for his admission into the sacrosanctum. He said evenly, "Leaving vague expressions out of account, what do you expect Lord Dorwin to do?" Thomas Sutt replied. He had a habit of addressing one in the third person when in his more stately moods. "It is quite evident," he observed, "that Mayor Hardin is a professional cynic. He can scarcely fail to realize that the Emperor would be most unlikely to allow his personal rights to be infringed." "Why? What would he do in the case they were?" There was an annoyed stir. Perrin said, "You are out of order, and are making what are nearly treasonable statements besides." "Am I to consider myself answered?" "Yes, and if you have nothing further—" "Don't jump to conclusions. I'd like to ask another question. Besides this stroke of diplomacy, which may or may not prove to mean anything, has anything concrete been done to meet the anacreonic menace?" Yate Fulman drew one hand along his ferocious red mustache. "You see a menace there, do you?" "Don't you?" "Scarcely." This with indulgence. "The Emperor—" "Great space!" Hardin felt annoyed. "What is this? Every once in a while somebody mentions Emperor or Empire as if it were a magic word. The Emperor is 50,000 parsecs away, and I doubt whether he gives a damn about us. And if he does, what can he do? What there was of the Imperial Navy in these regions is in the hands of the Four Kingdoms now, and Anacreon has its share. Listen, we have to fight with guns, not with words. Now get this. We had 2 months' grace so far, mainly because we've given Anacreon the idea that we've got atomic weapons. Well, we all know that's a little white lie. We've got atomic power, but only for commercial uses, and darn little at that. They're going to find that out soon, and if you think they're going to enjoy being jollied along, you're mistaken. My dear sir, hold on, I'm not finished. Hardin was just warming up. He liked this. It's all very well to drag counselors into this, but it would be much nicer to drag a few big siege guns fitted with beautiful atomic bombs into it. We've lost 2 months, gentlemen. We may not have another 2 months to lose. What do you propose to do? Said London Crass, his nose wrinkling angrily. If you're proposing militarization of the Foundation, I won't hear a word of it. It would mark our open entrance into the field of politics. We, Mr. Mayor, are a scientific foundation and nothing else. Added Soot. He does not realize, moreover, that the building armaments when being withdrawing men, valuable men, from the Encyclopedia. That cannot be done come what may. Very well. Very true, agreed Perrin. The Encyclopedia first, always. Hardin groaned in spirit. This board seemed to suffer violently from encyclopedia on the brain. He said icily, Has it ever occurred to this board that it is barely possible that Terminus may have interests other than the Encyclopedia? Perrin replied, I do not conceive, Hardin, that the Foundation can have any interest other than the Encyclopedia. I didn't say the Foundation. I said Terminus. I'm afraid you don't understand the situation. There's a good million of us here on Terminus, and not more than 150,000 are working directly on the Encyclopedia. To the rest of us, this is home. We were born here. We're living here. Compared with our farms and our homes and our factories, the Encyclopedia means nothing to us. We want them protected. He was shouted down. The Encyclopedia first, groaned out Crast. We have a mission to fulfill. Mission hell, shouted Hardin. That might have been true 50 years ago, but this is a new generation. That has nothing to do with it, replied Perrin. We are scientists. And Hardin leapt through the opening. Are you, though? That's a nice hallucination, isn't it? Your bunch here is a perfect example of what's been wrong with the galaxy for thousands of years. What kind of science is it to be stuck here for centuries, classifying the work of scientists of the last millennium? Have you ever thought of working towards extending knowledge and improving upon it? No. You're quite happy to stagnate. The whole galaxy is, and has been for space knows how long. That's why the periphery is revolting. That's why communications are breaking down. That's why petty wars are becoming eternal. That's why whole systems are losing atomic power and going back to barbaric techniques of chemical power. If you ask me, the whole galaxy's gone to pot. He paused and dropped into his chair to catch his breath, paying no attention to the 2 or 3 that were attempting simultaneously to answer him. Crast got the floor. I don't know what you're trying to gain by your hysterical statements, Mr. Mayor. Certainly you're adding nothing constructive to the discussions. I move, Mr. Chairman, that the Speaker's remarks be placed out of order and the discussion be resumed from the point where it was interrupted. George Farah bestirred himself for the first time. Up to this point, Farah had taken no part in the argument, even at its hottest. But now his ponderous voice, every bit as ponderous as his 300-pound body, burst its bass way out. Haven't we forgotten something, gentlemen? What? Said Perrin peevishly. That in a month we celebrate our 50th anniversary. Farah had a trick of uttering the most obvious platitudes with great profundity. What of it? And on that anniversary, continued Farah placidly. Harry Seldon's vault will open. Have you ever considered what might be in the vault? I don't know. Routine matters. A stock speech of congratulations, perhaps. I don't think any significance need be placed on the vault. Although the journal, and he glared at Hardin, who grinned back, did try to make an issue of it. I put a stop to that. Ah, said Farah. But perhaps you are wrong. Doesn't it strike you, he paused and put a finger to his round little nose, that the vault is opening at a very convenient time? Very inconvenient time, you mean, muttered Fulham. We've got some other things to worry about. Other things more important than a message from Harry Seldon? I think not. Farah was growing more and more pontifical than ever, and Hardin eyed him thoughtfully. What was he getting at? In fact, you all seem to forget that Seldon was the greatest psychologist of our time, and that he is the founder of the Foundation. It seems reasonable to assume that he used his science to determine the probable course of history of the immediate future, and if he did, as seems likely, I repeat, he would have certainly managed to find a way to warn us of danger and perhaps to point out a solution. The encyclopedia was very dear to his heart, you know. An aura of puzzled doubt prevailed, and Perrin hemmed. Well now, I don't know. Psychology is a great science, but there are no psychologists among us at the moment. I believe it seems we're on uncertain ground. Farah turned to Hardin. Didn't you study psychology under Iron? Hardin answered, half in reverie. Yes. I never completed my studies, though. I got tired of theory. I wanted to be a psychological engineer, but we lacked the facilities, so I did the next best thing. I went into politics. It's practically the same thing. Well, what do you think of the vault? And Hardin replied cautiously, I don't know. He did not say a word for the remainder of the meeting, even though it got back to the subject of the Chancellor of the Empire. In fact, he didn't even listen. He'd been put on a new track, and things were falling into place. Just a little. Little angles were fitting together, one or two, and psychology was the key. He was sure of that. He was trying desperately to remember the psychological theory he had once learned, and from it he got one thing right at the start. A great psychologist, such as Seldon, could unravel human emotions and human reactions sufficiently to be able to predict broadly the historical sweep of the future. And that meant my favorite book. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.